7:50. Yeah, we're live. live. It's all the way live. How's everybody doing tonight? I'm a little bit late. Tonight, though, I want to talk about displacement. I get asked this question and have for as long as I've been doing this. I get asked this question all the time. Hey, Richard, and the cool thing about this is it's not an LS thing, it's not a Ford thing or Chevy thing or whatever, a Dodge thing or an import thing. We could talk about K series or B series or whatever. It's always the same thing. Hey, what happens if I make this bigger? Okay, usually the question goes something like this: Richard, I have this combination. I have a a K20 Honda twin cam motor making lots of power. What happens? Should I pick that over a K24? No, you shouldn't. I know all the K20 guys are going to come unglued, but the reality is that the bigger motor makes more power. We see that in the LS world. We see that a 5.3 makes more power than a 4.8. A 6.0 makes more power than a 5.3. 6.2 even better. 7-liter even better. Some kind of stroker variant. All of that stuff. Small block Chevys. 302, 327, 350, 383, 400, whatever, bigger. You look at an RB motor, you got a RB20, you got a 2-liter, which is 6-cylinder, which is kind of cool. I really, really kind of want to put one of those together. An RB25, an RB26. And a lot of times people get confused because the configurations that you run the motors in or that they've been run in or are run in, especially from the factory, they're different. So, hey, one of them makes more power. Yeah, it did because they're running more boost or they're got different cams or more compression or whatever. But when these things are all configured the same, the bigger motor makes more power. But their question usually isn't that. I think people kind of have a handle on that. Like, yeah, a big 454 makes more than a 350. Yeah, we get that. The bigger one makes more power. That's not. I don't think that's. I don't think too many people are confused about that. I think that they realize that, hey, look, if I have there's a little bit of confusion there because, like, if we look at a small block Chevy, we look at a 350 and a 400. Well, they made a 350 that made a lot more power, like from the factory back in the muscle car era. The 350 made a lot more power than the 400, but it had nothing to do with the displacement. If you would have applied those same things that the 350 had, the LT1 had. 11-to-1 compression, the big cam. I would have used the Duntov cam anyways, but the high-rise intake manifold, the 780 hull, if you'd have used all that stuff on the 400, it just makes more power. Although, again, and here's one of the things we want to talk about tonight, is that in that particular instance, on a 400, the factory fuelie heads, which I know all of the boomer guys like, they would have been really restrictive on a 400. They were restrictive on a 350. They were restrictive on a 327. Heck, they were restrictive on a 302, on a DZ 302. I know all of this, and I'm my first car was a Camaro, so I'm right there with you. But the fuelie heads were not good. Not compared to anything. Not compared to a Boss Ford head. Not compared to a modern LS head and LT head. They're just not. They were We've come a long way since then. It was all cool to have those motors, but the heads were holding things back. And we saw that when in the comparison that I did with the Boss 302 and the DZ 302, that the Boss was able to make more power. The Ford was able to make more power than the Chevy with a milder cam because it had a lot more head flow. It had 200 or 210 versus 270. So it just was not even close. For the most part, the other things were kind of the same. They both had dual plane intake manifolds and carburetors, and they had that stuff. But if you have lots of cylinder head flow, it's just better. But we're getting off topic here. So what happens when we go from a K20 Honda to a K24, a B16 to a B18 and the Honda stuff? When we go from a 4.8 to a 5.3 to a 6.0, a 350 to a 400, or in a small block Ford, we go from a 302 to a 351. What happens when I do that? So what happens when I make it bigger? And a lot of times this question is, sometimes it's less about like a particular production-based change, and like a 302 and a 351. Sometimes we get that because that could be a fairly common swap for Mustangs and things. But a lot of times they ask about, like, what if I were to make a stroker out of this? So what if I take it, if it's an LS, what if I take a, a 4.8 or a 5.3 and I make a 383 stroker out of it? How much more power do I get? Well, it's fairly easy to figure that out And it's also not, because the answer is always is it depends. But one of the ways that you can kind of get an idea on what's going on, if you have a motor and you're thinking about doing a stroker in it, you're building a 383 Chevy or 383 LS, or even any weird variant of that. Because like some guys will take a 4.8 and they'll bore it out to, so they can put LS1 pistons in it. They'll use the 3900 bore. Some of them will go to a 4-inch bore, which I want to do. I haven't done it. I've been talking about it forever. The motor's over at the wrecking yard, but I haven't done it yet. But you could put a 4-inch bore in there. Then is it really a stroker? Because we didn't change the stroke, but you guys can argue about that. But you made the motor bigger. Some of them just put the 4-inch stroke or a 3900 stroke in these 4.8 and 5.3 and 6.0 LSs. They just put a 3900 in there. And then don't overbore it. Sometimes they overbore it a little bit, like on the 6-liter, they go 30 over. And so you get these different combinations of bores and strokes, and then you get a different combination of displacement. But it's really easy math. So like, and we'll use for very simple math here, and you can use everything in between. But whether we do it with a K series Honda or B series or an LS, if we take a motor that's a 300-inch motor, and it's making 1 horsepower per cubic inch, we have a motor that makes 300 horsepower. So we take that motor and however we do this, we make it 400 inches by boring it and or stroking it. And we're making 1 horsepower per cubic inch. Now we've gone from 300 horsepower to 400 horsepower. Obviously, the math is very rarely is it that simple, because 1 horsepower per cubic inch isn't a very high mark anymore. It was way back in the day, but it's not a very high mark anymore. 100 horsepower per liter would be a really good mark, especially when we're talking about these kinds of V8s. More apt to do that on the B series, K series, RB, 2J stuff, But if we're looking at whatever the specific output is of the motor, so if we got a 300 horsepower 300-inch motor and a 400 horsepower 400-inch motor, we could go up to 500 inches if you wanted to do that. Or you could make it, if it's making 1 horsepower per cubic inch, maybe it's making 1.5. Maybe you got a really good one that's making 2 horsepower per cubic inch. If we just increase the displacement, the math is very simple. But then that doesn't tell you the whole story. Unfortunately, I'd like to tell you that it does. And sometimes it does. If you go from a 4.8 to a 5.3 and we have the same things on there, the same heads cam and intake manifold, it maths out fairly well. Because we have other, like there's enough intake manifold, there's enough cylinder head there, the camshaft on a stock camshaft. The 5.3 makes a little bit more relative to its displacement than the 4.8. And so that works out fairly well. But once we start going up in power, that becomes more difficult. So if we go from, let's say a 5.3 and we go from that to a 383, well, we've gone from 325-inch motor, roughly 325-inch motor to 383-inch motor. So we'll say that that's 60 cubic inches. And if we had one that was making 325 horsepower, now do we have one that makes, and because it was making 1 horsepower per cubic inch, and now at 383 cubic inches, will it still make 383 horsepower? Because it's still making 1 horsepower per cubic inch. But is it? And that's the problem, is when you go up in displacement like that, things change. So now, do you have enough head flow to support that new power output? If your heads were marginal, fuely headed guys, are you guys listening? If you had marginal heads to begin with that didn't really support the potential power of the motor that you had, and then you win up in displacement, those heads are going to become more restrictive. So it would be more difficult to make the same specific output. 1 horsepower per cubic inch is very easy, but if we had a higher specific output, 1.2 or 1.3 or 1.5, and we had restrictive heads, when we go up in displacement, they're just becoming more restrictive. So that can become problematic. Sometimes that can stop you from making, if like on a lot of the LS stuff, particularly in LS3, we go up in displacement from a typical 6.2 LS3 to a 415. Well, that's okay in terms of the head department, because we have heads that will support more than 600 horsepower. So we got enough head flow there. I mean, ported heads will obviously help that, but we have enough head flow there. We also have a very good intake manifold. So now let's talk about the camshaft. So do we have a stroker camshaft? Well, it's not really that. It's more of a displacement thing. if we want to continue, especially if we have an elevated specific output, and this works, like I said, with K series Hondas and B series Hondas and RBs and 2Js, whatever works with any motor. If you have the things already that allow you to go up in displacement, you have enough camshaft, you have enough compression, you have enough head flow, you have enough intake manifold flow, and they were wanting more motor anyways, and then you go up in displacement, you're going to look like a hero. If even one of those things is restricting you, that's going to become problematic. So if you have, like if we on a 5.3, let's say we use all the stock stuff. We have the stock truck intake manifold. We got that stock, wimpy LM7 camshaft. We got stock 706 or 862 heads. And then we make it a 383, but we keep all that stuff in there. Well, the head flow is still fairly good. It's enough to support a lot of power. I mean, it's enough to support nearly 500 horsepower. We're not going to make that with a 383. The intake manifold we know is good, but in the case of the LS, it's not the heads or the intake manifold, it's the camshaft. That mild stock camshaft is not going to allow you to make very much power because it's already kind of limiting a stock motor. We know that because we see when we put cams in even a stock motor, we get some gigantic horsepower gains on the LS side because it has the other things. So if one of those things is holding it back, it's harder to go up in displacement and maintain that same specific output. RBs are the same way. You go from a 2 liter to a 2.5 to a 2.6, and then they go up even bigger than that, up over 3 liters, 3.2s and 3.4s, and the RB motors are kind of common. And in fact, Jimmy and I were talking about that because we watched one of the, I think it was a Street Alpha podcast where the guy that was on there was an RB guy. I think probably from Australia because they tend to do big power over there. But they were talking about the difference between a 3.2 and a 3.4. He's like, yeah, the 3.2 really loves to rev and the 3.4 is like really torquey. I'm like, well, that might be true. I would expect a 3.4 to make more average power torque than a 3.2 RB. And I'm obviously no RB expert, but I know a little bit about how motors work. And if for instance, like I didn't see a back-to-back dyno curve, which I would have liked to have seen. So if the 3.4 falls off at the top and the 3.2, like let's say wants to rev out and keeps making power and somehow surpasses the 3.4, it just tells me that there's not enough head flow or not enough cam timing or the intake manifold doesn't flow enough or is not the right runner length for the bigger motor. You can make the bigger motor do those things. You could make a 3.4 do what a 3.2 does very, very easily. You just have to give it what it wants. Like I've said this many times, if you have a professional form of motorsports and there's a limitation on displacement, nobody's going to pick a smaller motor than whatever that limit is. Everybody's going to pick the limit, the biggest motor that they can, and then they're going to rev it as high as anybody allows them to rev it. If there's some sort of RPM limit, they're going to rev to that limit, because they know that combination of things is going to make the most power. Now all they have to do is give it enough head flow, give it the right cam timing, give it the right intake manifold design for the RPM range that they're wanting to run, and then away they go. So that isn't inherent in displacement. It just means that there's some sort of limiting factor there, just like we were talking about with the 4.8 and the 5.3. If something's holding that back, and then you go to a 383. If you were to put all of that stock 4.8 and 5.3 stuff on a 6.0, it would be even worse. And here's the problem. If we put all that stuff on a 6.0, the 706 heads or the 862 heads would be better than the 317 heads. They'd actually make more power, even though they flow less, but they would have more compression. So all of these things then need to be considered when we're talking about specific output and changing the displacement. That's why it's never guys want a simple, a one sentence thing. Yeah, it'll make this much power. Yeah, I could guess on that, I guess. Or if I've run something like they have, I could tell them, hey, look, when I did this, I could tell them that. They want a simple answer. But as you know, it's it's never a simple answer. Let's see what you guys got going on tonight. No replacement for displacement. That's right. Good thing I was just listening to the Nitrous Big Block chat I missed. And today I posted up some stuff on the 408 Ford that I did with the nitrous on it. And so it was like a 600 horsepower motor. It did good. And one of the things, because the teaser that I did on it was like, how to make an 800 horsepower 351 Windsor. Well, it's not a 351. It was the first thing. We make it bigger right off the bat, because when it's bigger, we can make more power. Put good heads on it. We did. We had the Trick Flow 11Rs. We had a big camshaft, like 250 at 50, so it's just 250, 254, pretty good size. 600 lift kind of thing, a single plane high rise 950 Holly, and it made good power. And then we just put 200 horsepower with a nitrous on it. Basically, it made nearly 200 more horsepower. So very, very easy. K24 parts are also everywhere. Yeah, and I know that in that world, the K20 and the K24 stuff, that the K20 likes to rev, and that's the one that we use for racing or whatever. And the K24, we don't like the balance shafts, we don't like the oil pump, blah 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 blah, whatever, and all that's fine. But of the two of those, especially for the street, I would always pick the K24 because it would be way torqueier than a K20 is. No substitutes for no substitution for cubic inches. I think we missed the dyno room. I know but I'm going to be going back down there. 202 heads. Yeah. The 202 fuelie heads that you're talking about. Is it when we bore it so big, it becomes unreliable because the sleeves are too thin? On the LS motor, well, and on some of the other motors too, but definitely on the LS stuff, is a lot of guys will go to, like on the 4.8 and 5.3, they'll go to 4 inches, which is bigger than you're technically supposed to. Bigger than the OEMs than GM ever designed or thought of. On the 6-liter, guys will go from the 4-inch bore to a 4065. Normally, we just recommend you go 30 over on those, but guys go to 4065 so they can make it a 6.2 and use 6.2 pistons and stuff. And that's all great. But very few of them, when I have this discussion with them, I'm like, oh, okay, you did that. That's great, I guess. But did you like sonic check? What is the sleeve thickness? What's the minimum sleeve thickness that you have? Because that's the important thing. Like even off all the rest of the sleeve, or if you just had one bad one, but if you had one bad one that was bad only in one spot, well, it's 100 thousandths there, and everywhere else it's 180. That's because that the stuff's moving around. That's not enough. It's probably going to break. And then they want to run, well, I made it bigger, now I can run boost. I'm like, no, it's the opposite of that. Keep it at a 6-liter. And the only reason I'd go 30 over, I wouldn't even go 30 over if I had an iron block. I'd just go 10 if you could go 10 if you were going to run boost, because the boost is going to decide what happens, not that displacement. Dyno. Yeah, we're going to do more stuff. More cubic inches, drives a bigger turbo. Is the wall thickness and cooling? Yeah, but all of those are problems. Strength and cooling are both problems. I wonder how the old Chrysler 906 heads stack up to the others. Are those small block heads? Because a Chrysler head is about like a small block Chevy head. So neither one of those, the small block stuff, neither one of those compare, like a J head or an X head. For the small block stuff, none of those compare to a Boss head. The crank and pistons are balanced together as well. When you overbore and use a heavier piston without changing the stroke length, you end up causing more piston ring cylinder wear. Yeah, I don't agree with that. And you would rebalance the assembly. If you put new pistons in it, most people don't just do pistons, but if you did pistons, normally they would do rods. So you do a piston and a rod combination. And if you're not changing the stroke, I would argue that you're not going to change side loading. What's the best heads for a 383 setup? A 383 what? Small block Chevy or an LS? Doesn't make sense. There's so many different bore and stroke combinations that work fine. Under square, over square. Yeah, it's not. I think people remember people used to talk a lot about that back in the small block Ford days too. Oh, 347, that's too much side loading. I'm like, your car is going to crash before you have to worry about that. What do you think of LT1 heads on an LS3? If you already have the heads, worth the swap, or forget the LTs and run LS3 heads. If you already have both heads, I would only put LS3 heads on it, because you're not just swapping the heads. If you put LT heads on there, you have to get a different cam. You have to have LT rockers. You have to have LT valve covers. You have to have an LT intake manifold. You have to have LT exhaust. And then you have no, I think now there is some sort of accessory drive for that. But for a long time, there's no accessory drive for LT heads on an LS block. So we could run it on the dyno with a zero electric water pump, but I don't think you gain anything from doing that compared to the LS3 heads that are already out there. An aluminum 6.0 and would a low buck truck cam with 862 heads make good torque? Yes, very good. And especially if you included long tube headers with that. What kind of power do you think a 6-liter with a sloppy stage 2 and a 3584 at 10 pounds would make? Well, that's probably not what I would pick. I think 10 pounds on that combination on a cam 6-liter with a 3584 is going to be up near the flow limit of the turbo. So I'd put a G42 on it. But I would think, let's say you're at 450, another 225, 675. So yeah, you're going to be up near 700 or so on a 6-liter. I think I would definitely go with the G42 on a 6-liter. I wish GM would stop recycling the numbers. LT, yeah, it is confusing. I know 6s are big block heads. Big block Mopar heads are also not good. They're not even close to what a Recport big block Chevy head flows. What are your thoughts using block fillers? I think race guys do it. I've never done it, and doubt I ever would, and I wouldn't do it for any, because most of my stuff is like for street, so I wouldn't do that. 1111. Power gains of LT is direct injection, not the heads. The heads flow very well also, but I don't know how much better they flow than a LS3 head. That's heads for a 383 LS. Well, how much power are you trying to make? There's lots of good 383 LS heads. Because once you go to a 3900 bore, which is that's what that would be, there it opens up your ability. The AFR has some good stuff. TFS has some good stuff. Even really professionally ported stock stuff like 243s are really good for that. You can get enough cylinder head to make more power than you're ever going to make with that 383. You got heads that will flow 300 plus CFM, and that's more than what you're probably going to do with it. Can a 6-liter with flat top pistons handle boost? Yes, it can, because you have a 6-liter with flat top pistons, but those would have come with 317 heads, so you don't have. I mean, the compression's 10-1, so it'd be fine. Have a 68 Firebird with a 350. Nice. Your thoughts on keeping it versus LS swapping, unless you have a line on a 400 block? I do have a 400 block, as a matter of fact. I have a 69 or 70 manual transmission block. I know, because it has the thing for the clutch fork. Not a Chevy guy. That said, I'm building a small block Chevy 421, 10.5-1. Want this to run on pump gas, looking for cam and heads. What is the 421? Is it a not? I mean, it's still going to be a 425 bore, right? If in an alternate universe it were commonplace to buy custom pistons with camshaft upgrade, would grinds ultimately change or be the same as we have now? Well, having a piston with valve reliefs to allow you to basically have wilder cam timing is obviously possible. So that's not a problem. But still, the number of people that would want that much bigger of a camshaft, that's a really small part of the market. So guys that want, like right now, if we take an LS, you can put, let's say, a 235 camshaft in there, because it's duration, it's not lift. So from 190 degrees, which is what the smallest stock one is, to 235, that encompasses the vast majority of the market. And part of that might be because that's what fits. But if we had valve reliefs, I mean, there are valve notching tools. There are also lots and lots of guys out there putting rods and pistons in these things because they want to upgrade them to put turbo stuff on there. But even still, they don't buy bigger camshafts because it's really not necessary unless you're doing like an NA, like all motor kind of deal where you'd be running a big camshaft. Like I said, but that's just not, it's not good for the street, and it's much less common. The 6-liter with a 3584 work better running autocross than a G42 since it would have virtually no lag. Yeah, as long as you're not trying to run 10 pounds. And definitely I would get, we're going to have something out pretty soon that will be between those two. And so it will be the 3584 for the 6 liter. I mean, it's not going to be called that, but that's essentially what it'll be. My 3800 blew up in my 4th gen Camaro Firebird. Going to put supercharged 3800 into it. What other mods do I need to do before the new engine's in? Most guys on the 3800 would put ring gap in it if you're going to run it supercharged. It's a 421. It's a 4125 bore. Is it some weird stroke length? Is it like a 3900 or something? Just bought oil for my truck and filter, $50. Any advantages to ball bearing turbos? Yeah, there are. For I think that Robert from Force Performance, I think, did the best interview I saw with talking about the ball bearing stuff. He was talking about the longevity under low oil conditions. That the ball bearing turbos will tolerate that more than a journal bearing will. So if you have an application where you're out road racing or something and you starve it for oil temporarily, which can happen, you would be more likely to hurt journal bearing turbos than you would ball bearing turbos. Otherwise, there's not going to be a spool rate change like some guys talk about. I've had guys tell me, "Oh yeah, it comes on 500 RPM earlier." I'm like, "No, that's not a thing. That's not reality." So it's probably an amount that you can't even measure, the difference between a journal bearing and a ball bearing. And I don't even know about longevity because a lot of the factory stuff has been journal bearing and has lasted a long time. Once there's oil there, they work really well. What does it take to reach 2 horsepower per cubic inch with an NA2 valve V8? You mean like a small block Chevy or a small block Ford or an LS? It just takes it takes a lot of stuff. It takes a really, really big camshaft. It takes a lot of compression. A dry sump usually helps that a lot. You got to have heads that will support, the flow rate's got to be 50% or more of the target power output. Usually short runner, high RPM intake, associated valve train that goes along with that. I've heard bigger, longer stroke engines have more piston and skirt wear, side load, and more piston speed. The piston speed certainly is real. But does that mean that big blocks wear more than small blocks do? I have a 6 liter. Trust me, the OEMs that put the motors together, those guys knew what they were doing. Got 6 liter Trailblazer SS intake. 706 or 243. So first of all, what 6 liter do you have? Is it an LQ4? Is it an LQ9? Is it an LY6? Is it what did it start out as, and what does it have on it now? And then how much power are you trying to make? And like what do you want to do with it? Or is this a drag race thing? Is it a street driver, a daily driver? Is it a tow vehicle? Got to give me some more information. Near. Getaway, good to see you. A 38750 stroke. Okay, yeah, I thought it was going to be something weird. Not weird, just different than normal, different than a 3750, and different than a 4-inch. How did the S2K motor turn out? I don't remember saying what power it made. Jimmy ran it up on the dyno today up to almost 20 pounds. So he's got a whole bunch of testing going on it. He's going to go back and take a look and do more testing tomorrow. So we'll see what happens. So, but it's making, we want to make sure that everything is perfect, and then we'll do back turbo tests on it. So we'll run the G3770. Right now it has a G35 on it. And then we also want to run the GTX 3584 on it. I don't know if he'll run, maybe we might try the G42 on there. I don't know that that's a good turbo for anything other than making a bajillion horsepower. It wouldn't certainly be something that would be fun on the street. But it'll be interesting to see what the, even if we just ran it at, like, let's say, ran them all at 20 pounds, it'd be interesting to see what the back pressure is, the response rate, charge temperature differences, if there's any charge temperature difference. Since I built the 383 setup, the torque is pretty considerable from when it was a 5.7. Yeah, that's the one thing that will happen is even if you're limited by, like we were talking about, we're limited by cylinder head flow. So if you take a 4.8 or a 5.3 and you make a 383 out of it, even if you don't get big gains because you're restricting it somehow at the top, you're going to get big gains down low. You'll get big torque gains. You'll get commensurate torque gains relative to the displacement change. It has 9.4 to 1 compression now and 10 pounds. I'm not sure how far I can push it. Did you put ring gap in it? 5.3 LS Gen 4 with a BorgWarner SX65, Lobach truck cam, 6L90. I'm putting it in a 2012 Sprinter van to tow. One air-to-water intercooler be okay? Yeah, if you have room up there, I think I would put an air-to-air for something like that. But the air-to-water will also work. Just have to have a good heat exchanger up front. My town of Pellston, Michigan, is that what it is? Set a record high temperature today of 47. Nice. Is that just a record for this date and time or something? I like the taller oil filters for my truck. Good to see you guys. Can you go too big? Scrolling back, scrolling. Can you go too big on charge pipe sizing? I have 6.2 rods and pistons, twin 67mm turbos, looking to do twin intercoolers. 3-inch charge pipe is 3 inches too big. No, that's fine. Is that what size the inlet and the outlet of the intercoolers are? That will be fine. I think your twin 67mm would be the thing that I'd want to talk to you about, not the charge piping size. Drop the D16 and S25MT out the bottom of the Civic. Nice. Waiting for the guys to come get it. What's the matter with it, Getaway? 3.8 Buicks have terrible oil pressure, so maybe the ball bearing was a good choice. Okay. I didn't realize they had an oiling problem. Eric, you got to tell me what you want to do with that combination. Next is sell my spare guitar to afford the bulk of swap mount coats. Okay. To recommend placing the LS torque to yield front balancer bolt. It says that you're supposed to, but I never have on any of our junkyard motors. But if you saw the snout of the cam or the of the crank, maybe it's a better idea. What cam is good for a daily 4.8? I actually think something smaller than our Lobach truck. So I like that crane cam that we had. I think was pretty good. It was like a 206, 212 or something like that. The average late model engine should make 1.1 to 1.2 per cubic inch in stock form. Make up to 1.5. The like a factory 4.8 and 5.3 don't do that. The 6-liter is an LQ9. I have a ported Trailblazer SS intake. What cam do you have in it? Do you know? Long tube headers mostly for the street. If you put if you ported 706s will be fine. If they're proper, you can get 706s with bigger valves and stuff to make really good power. They'll flow more than you'll make with that combination. So either one of those will work. If you have ported 243s, those will also work. Speed freak, your stuff is gapped. You're all gapped and slapped. Also wanted to say that I appreciate all the work and time you put into testing. The fact that you're sharing this information with everyone's free is next level. Yeah, I know. I want people to learn. If you want 2 horsepower per cubic inch, you're either building a race motor or adding boost. Yeah, 2 horsepower per cubic inch NA is hard to do. Richard, wonder if you ever tested a 5-liter small block Ford truck intake on the dyno. The lowers allegedly what Holley and others use theirs off of. Just wondering. I haven't. I would like to. I don't think the upper part of the truck one is very good, but I would like to compare it to at least compare it to a stock Mustang HO. For a 69 Camaro, 396 big block, pump gas, 2-bolt, aluminum heads, what's a reasonable amount of power? I don't think there's any reason, like if you did 1.2 horsepower per cubic inch, 4 and 4, 8, 480. I've seen a lot of 500 horsepower builds with, if you put, a decent kind of like an Airflow Research 265 head on there, you could certainly make that much, 1.2 or 1.3 horsepower per cubic inch. Saw one on an old Celine Fox body race car and found it curious. The Celine intake upper, I think that theirs did look, the lower one did look like a truck lower. It's got the weird shaped bottoms. But I've not seen anybody test. I don't remember anybody testing the upper part of the truck that goes with that. I have seen them do the Celine ones and the Holley Systemax ones too. Appreciate your time. Happy to help. Mostly street, sometimes to the drag strip. Yeah, in either one of those heads are going to be fine. What's better on drag racing? 454 big block, a 671 roots blower, or a ProCharger F1X? An F1X would make more power than a 671, if that's what you're trying to do. Used to hear 383 stroker, but now hear 388. Used to hear that from who? If that's based on LS stuff, that's because they're doing it with a big bore block. I have a 5.7, which is flat top with 243s. At idle, a Buick Grand National will make 1 psi of oil pressure for every 100 RPM. That's horrible. How much power can a stock 4L60, 4L80 hold? What's the best budget transmission option for? I don't know of any budget transmission options. The budget transmission option is a junkyard stock kind of, or the other kind of is the 4200 Atlas motor converter. So put that converter in it. And then if the 4L80 is in good enough shape and you get somebody to tune it, it will hold the reasonable amount of power. Is a 320 CFM head enough for a 242, 258? Yeah, that's enough to make 640 horsepower, let's say. And I have an 06 Sierra, stock LQ4, truck Norris cam, 4L80. Going to be going with a T4 turbo, 775 T51R VS Racing. Okay, yeah, the VS Racing 7875 is good. Is it a Gen 2.5 or next gen or something? How do you feel about eBay headers? They work fine. We've run lots of cheap headers. I don't know exactly which ones you're talking about, just headers that came from eBay, but we've run lots of inexpensive headers. They work fine. It was for sure a truck upper and lower. He had close-up photos. Okay, so something he put on there, because a Celine wouldn't have come like that. Do you think with what I currently have, I can build a 408 for my truck and the turbo will still flow? Joey, Yeah, you can. It just depends on what turbo you have. I don't know the numbers that you gave past 78, 75, but the turbo is going to dictate the power. So if you have 1,000 horsepower turbo, it doesn't matter whether you have it on a 6-liter or a 408. I mean, the 408 is going to make it come up sooner, but it's still going to make 1,000 horsepower. 3.3 was a board and stroke 350. Yep. Transmissions are rated for torque, not horsepower. For example, 4L60 is rated for 360 foot-pounds. Let me get your guess. Just finishing up a C5 here. LS1, LS6 intake, sloppy stage 1, ported in deck, 799 heads, flex setup, and exhausted through an automatic. If the heads are really good, the cam's a little small, I think. So we have, I think we made about 350 at the tire with the 5.3, and that's just a stock head and a stock truck intake manifold and just the truck plus cam. And I think it's about 350 at the tire. So if you've got ported ones and they've been decked and that's a little bit smaller cam, you got a good intake manifold. Yeah, it might, and that's a 5.7. So yeah, you might get there. How long will 1,000 horsepower, 1,200 horsepower, 6-liter or LQ4 last before rods break from fatigue cycle or something? I don't think you have to worry about fatigue cycling them out, because they're honestly not going to run at 1,000 horsepower for very many cycles. They're going to be driving around most of the time. Mike, Happy New Year. What's the one thing you shouldn't keep out in an LS build? On a turbo one, ring gap. Thank you for your answers. Love the videos. Hoping to build a low buck 302 within a year. Yeah, a little harder to do, although you can get the junkyard GT40 heads, and those work pretty good. How much port matching an OG Performer 350 EFI 351 after the GT40 reported? You mean, how are you asking how much you have to port the intake to match the heads? 7875 is a Gen 2.5. Okay, yeah, let's say that that's 1,000 horsepower turbo then. Boosted 3.7G V6. Yeah, don't have one of those and don't know anything about them. I don't know what kind of bell housing there or any of that. Have you ever seen ring gap be 30,000s on a high mileage L33? I have seen ring gap be higher than normal on some of the motors I've taken apart, but I think that that's because they were changed, because I've seen lots of them with high mileage that have ring gap in the teens. So I don't think that mileage, and whenever we measure any of the bores on the LS, you can normally still see the crosshatch on them, even with 200,000 or 300,000 miles on them. So the bore wears very, very little. And I don't think that the rings can wear enough to change the gap that much. Our L33 had a lot of ring gap, but had almost no bore wear. Is it worth it in horsepower? Port matching, it, to me, is a waste of time. I've not seen port matching do anything. So until I see that, that's going to be my opinion. Port matching. I think it makes you feel better. And I think that head porting guys and intake porting guys will do that, because they wouldn't be able to not do that, because they wouldn't be able to sleep at night thinking that there's a mismatch, only because they've never tested mismatches. And I've tested lots of them. We've run rectangle port big block manifolds on peanut port heads, and it still works, and it still makes pretty good power. So I don't know how much more it makes. Like, we can't run the same intake manifold in that test, but it still works. In fact, the Mercury Marine did that. Their manifolds were that. They were rec port manifolds on oval port heads. And they're like, yeah, that's fine. Works fine. how long will 1,000 horsepower stock bottom end run? There are guys that get drag race them and get like 3 or 4 seasons with them. So it just depends on what your tune is and other things. What's a good place for an M122 blower? Used but in good condition, of course, on the low end. You want to put it on something? Go to SWS or whatever, that guy that has all the kits now that he's doing for adapter plate stuff. Like Tom Demuse kind of started that, I think. But this guy is taking it to a whole new level. He's doing it for lots of different applications, and he's got a bunch of them where that kind of blower would go on there. 6.2, a stage 3 BTR cam. How would spool be with twin 3584s? Not good. I mean, that's you know that's like 17 or 1800 horsepower with the turbos, right? Do you want that much power? Tell me how much power you want, and then I'll tell you why you should get the mirror image 3076s. I mean, G30 770s. Would a 3.9 stroke live longer than a 4-inch stroke? Everything else being equal and revving to 7,200, no power adders. No, I don't think it would. I don't think you'd be able to measure the difference. And I also don't think you're going to own your motor long enough to worry about that. And also, you're going to make less power. In your opener, are you thinking just swapping the short block to increase displacement? That could potentially have the benefit of more compression if you started with a dish piston. Well, in our discussion, it would be that, well, and it depends. When you did your 383 or when you did your displacement change, one of the things, we have to ask is, did you change the compression? We talked about not doing that as a change in just displacement, so no other change. And then we went into, okay, do the heads flow enough? Does the intake flow enough? Is the camshaft big enough? Compression would be another thing. Did we change the compression? Do we need to change compression? 3.7 Jeep PowerTech uses the same bell housing as a 4.7 V8. Yeah, I don't have anything that fits a 4.7 V8. Engines were in everywhere. Doing a 489 Gen 6 big block. Is it worth doing a forged crank, or is a cast crank just fine? If it's something I was driving around and maybe taking to a track once in a while, I wouldn't put a steel crank in. I wouldn't worry about it. If I was building it for a marine application where I was going to see wide open throttle for long periods of time, I would put a steel crank in it. So even if you're flow limited, the compression ratio increase still nets more power. So forget about all the other things that we're talking about. If you increase compression, you increase power. So compression adds power. Only reason with the small cam is the stock stall. Yep. How long will a 1,400 horsepower stock bottom end LS6 last? And what should you check? Didn't we already go through that a bunch of times already? Are you just sneaking up on the power levels now? Wasn't the question is 1,200 and now it's 1,400? Yeah, we're not going to do that. You need to check everything. You need to check into a different block, into a different crank, into different rods, into all that. There's lots of guys running stock bottom end stuff at that level. Similar to another question, a 6.2 with a Chopper cam, GTX 3582 and a 1.0 housing. I would like 650 to 700 rear wheel horsepower. We'll do occasional towing, decent match. No, that's not a good match. Not for 700 wheel horsepower. Not on a 6.2. I would pick a bigger turbo. Enjoy your content. I don't know why guys are with these bigger motors like a 6.2 or a 6.0. You should put the G42 turbo on there. I would put a G42 on a 5.3 if I was towing. It would work just fine. And in fact, guys that are thinking about getting a GTX 3584 RS, you should get the 121 housing. You shouldn't get the smaller housing. Maybe on a 4.8, but not on a 5.3, and certainly not on a 6.0. Definitely get the bigger housing. I have a 98 GMC Sierra, 4.3 liter V6. So we've got some good 4.3 stuff coming up. 98,000 miles. I want to turbocharge it and daily drive it. What should I do? You should go on to the 4.3 groups, and guys have done that, and they'll show you how to do that with the stock injection and all that. I don't know. I don't know how they're doing the tuning. Maybe tuning's available for them. You would do injector upgrades. You'd have to have tuning. You have to be able to take timing away. But otherwise, it's just running. There are inexpensive turbo kits available for 4.3s. I don't know about that specific chassis fitment, but all you've got to do is, a turbo kit's very easy. You just get all the exhaust to the turbo, find out where the turbo is going to mount, route the exhaust to the turbo, route the exhaust out of the turbo, and route the discharge from the turbo to an intercooler, hopefully, and then into your throttle body. I have it all ready from another build. That's what I was asking. Yeah, I think that what happens is people have these little turbos and they think, oh, well, I'm just going to turn it up. No, you're not. It will work really good like at 7 pounds. It'll be good. It'll be responsive. It'll be fun. It'll be fast. And then the problem is people start thinking, okay, turbo, now I got to make lots of power. Well, you can, but you got to have the right turbo to do that. The turbos are sized for specific outputs. Can the transmission in the 06 Silverado be built to withstand 1,000 horsepower? I don't know what's in that. Is it a what motor did it come with? Did it already have a 4L80? If it had a 4L80, yes. If it has a 4L60, no. What was your concern with using the VS Racing 6762 as twins on the 6.2? It has a mild cam in it. It's a weekend driver. I think twin 67s might be too big. Like I choose the turbos for how much power I want to make. So how much power are you trying to make? So that's where you start. And then you pick your turbos to make that amount of power. Like all of our turbos could make that power or could work there. You could put twin GT42s on there. You could put twin 3584s, twin 3582s, twin G3770s. But depending on how much power you want, one of those is going to be better than the others. You have a turbo suggestion for a 427 small block that makes 620 NA horsepower. Had a Pro Charger on it, but I want to go twins. I'm getting old and want to quiet things down. The first thing, well, I'd ask two things. One, how much power do you want to make? As always, because that's how we pick the turbos. The other thing is if you have a 427 that was making 620 NA horsepower, you have a big cam in it, which was probably very beneficial for a centrifugal blower. So what is the cam in it? And if you're wanting to quiet things down, I think I'd put a smaller cam in if you're going to go turbo. Do you balance in the engines you build when you change from stock components, or you just send it? Is balancing worth it? Yes, I balance every motor that I run if I change something in it. Have you ever tested a Rotrek supercharger? Yes. It is a centrifugal supercharger. It 100% is that design. And yeah, we have a video up on that already. We ran one at Jimmy's place on the Tahoe. 13 to 1400. Okay, twin. Yeah. Probably the mirror image 3582s then, I guess. Have you ever ran vibrant, ultra quiet mufflers and exhaust setup? I have not. Does trying to make the exhaust lower in dB a bad thing? Only if they're doing that by increasing restriction. So if the exhaust becomes more restrictive in their quest for quiet, yeah, got some alliteration there. Then yeah, it can consume some of the power. Pulsar says rated at 900. Google says no. ChatGTP says it would be good. So it's already slow spool my 3-liter 535. That's why I thought it might work. Cruising. I'm scrolling. Scrolling. Weren't you asking about a 62 millimeter? Can't remember. .62 with a 3582. Just trying to scroll back here. Oh, 67, 62. Okay, I might have read that wrong. What's a 67? Let me look up. Let me see how BS is rating that. There. Let's go to our magic box. Okay, let's see. Those will 67, 62s will be enough to make a lot of power. If it's a good 67 millimeter compressor, you know, it could be 900 horsepower. I mean, our 3584 is rated at over 900 horsepower on the cold side, and so the hot side won't do that on an LS, but it would do it on something smaller like Jimmy's motor. We hope Jimmy's K series. Don't rely on Chat GPT to make mechanical decisions. Yeah, I don't. Or do, and let's watch and see what happens. Should I do a low buck cam or 212, 218, 218, 224 for 48 LS, trying to get all more power on it since I have to do the lifters? Plan on adding a Pro Charger one day. All of those will work. I think you probably will like the low buck truck cam the best of those, or the 212, 218. I think you won't like the bigger cam on there. I don't think you'll like the 218, 224 on there on a 4.8. It's going to be soft down low, but a 4.8 with a converter would be better with any of those cams. Loved it. No drone. Might be able to find a leak. Okay, so just misread initially. Maybe a good fit on the 6.2. Cruising. Let's see. I gotta go back to this one. Okay, 6.2, 3582. Yeah, you're gonna at 700 wheel horsepower. That's going to be 800 flywheel horsepower cruising. That's not where you want to be with that turbo. The hot side is going to be the problem. Shopping for food. I just checked in on YouTube. Thanks for the recommendation I got about these. Really hard for me to give up long tube header sound for short turbo headers. Yeah, turbo motor certainly is going to sound different than an NA long tube header one. Got a couple more minutes. I never even put a poll up. So if you're, like I said, if you're going to get a 3584, get the 121 housing. Yeah, the hot side is definitely it. It will work good and it'll be responsive. That motor's big though. Like I would get a just get a G42. But the hot side is going to be problematic on that. It probably will be fun at like 7 pounds, and then you'll start running into. I'd start be worried, maybe concerned a little bit about the back pressure. Got your truck plus cam, turbo 5.3. Got a 7689 sheet metal intake. Rough guess on where power would be. Don't want to over rev. Also have a Pro LS rotating assembly. Can rev to 8500. Yeah, you're with that cam, you're not going to be running at 85. You're not going to be making power at 8500, so that's not a problem. The sheet metal manifold and a 5.3 on a truck plus for, I don't know. It's going to be mid 4s, 460 or 470 NA, something like that, maybe. I don't know what heads you have. And then the turbo, I don't know what boost you're running. A sheet metal manifold will raise it up. It's going to lose power through a lot of the curve, make a little bit more peak maybe. But it's going to be a function of how much ever boost you run. Yeah, cruising. That's right. It's only money. No, I get it. I would try to sell the one that you have and then use that to fund the next one. The skirt wear on an LS stroker engine piston still an issue. Which manufacturers have the best designs to minimize this? I think you're worried about something that's not a thing to worry about. Ever test motorcycle engines? Yeah, I've owned lots of motorcycles. And the only dyno testing that I've done on a motorcycle was with Tom when he worked at West Tech, and he was prepping his 600 to run some sort of production 600 class at Bonneville. And so we got to, this was really cool. We got to run his motorcycle, strapped his motorcycle down to the chassis dyno. We stood on either side of it and ran it on the dyno. And then he made changes to things. And we were filming with a strobe. We were watching the injectors, and you could see it go down into the valves and stuff. It was really awesome. And so he was doing some things to try to make power, different exhaust and things. Can we look forward to in future videos coming up? Yeah, we have more videos coming up. The next ones will be on tomorrow's probably Friday, right? Yeah, I'm not going to put it up on Friday. So they'll be on the weekend or first of next week on the 8.1 testing that we did. How much do you think an LS 6-liter iron block board, a 4065 stage 4 LS2 BTR cam, LS Pro Force pistons, 823? So it's just an LS3 then with 823 heads. And what 102 intake manifold is it? And I don't know what the specs are on that cam. But when we put a cam on a cammed LS3, let's say, which is kind of what that is going to be, it could be anywhere from 540 to 570. Do really appreciate your input. Now make a turbo kit for the Gen 4 truck so I don't have to fabricate my own. We haven't checked it yet, but I think our kit will work on a Gen 4. How do I know what converter is right for the low buck truck? It has a 4060 and a 4x4. I don't know if that matters. You can run a stock converter with that cam if you want, or something that's like a 2500 is going to be fine. 2500 to 2800 will be good. 706 heads on it, 15 psi. I'm more curious of power curve ideas. Oh, yeah, it's with that intake manifold on there. If it's one of the sheet metal-y fabricated short runner things, it's going to want to make power up at like 7,000 or something. I can look on there and see. I'm trying to remember what motor we ran for that. I think it was a 5.3. Port and then turbocharged. Let's see if I have, oh, there we go. 5.3 turbo intake test. So we had NA file test description. We have a 5.3 with that snipery fabricated shiny intake manifold that everybody runs, 102 millimeter throttle body, 1 7/8 headers, a 227 243 cam, 615 lift, 113 is a comp cam, and that made peak power at 72 71 7200. So if that helps you. Pepe, thank you very much. Midnight up in Maine. Burn the midnight oil. I like it. How do I get a smaller hot side for twin turbos like one of your videos mentioned? Have you looked at our turbos? Like what turbos are you? How much power are you trying to make? What motor is it? Blah 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 blah. Thank you for so much for the information for the 4.8. The 4-point great, I think you mean, right? Actually, aspirated 363, TFS 11Rs. Joey, I would recommend a 90 millimeter throttle body if you could put it on there, but it's probably not going to fit on a System X, but at least a 75. I saw a guy's car that worked for a turbo manufacturer at compound turbo setups. Compound stuff is pretty cool. Ever tried any of the more recently discovered junkyard gem motors, the Nissan VQ? I have run the Atlas. I haven't run a VQ though, but Evan and I were talking about that, and he might be getting a Godzilla also. Tried to find YouTube runs of the cam, but I couldn't find it. For which one, Richard? Scrolling. Oh yeah, if you look at the, it's it would be under LS boosted like turbo. It would be under that playlist, and it's a or if you do a search for LS turbo intake test, it should come up. It was in a KSR video, a new employee. Yeah, compound stuff is pretty cool. More common in diesel stuff, obviously, than gas stuff, but people still do it. You can make lots of power. Oh, I have we've run the Truck Plus. We've run the there's videos of us. I think I have videos of running that in the Tahoe, and then I have videos of us running it in a 6-liter. We compared it to the low buck truck, and then ran the stock truck intake manifold and the Trailblazer SS on both combinations. And on that note, it is time to go. Thank you guys all for showing up, and I will be back tomorrow. Friday. It's Friday. We got no job.